Greetings, shadow dwellers. I am the Howlerist. Tonight I bring you a tale where sanity crumbles like ash in trembling hands, where the mind becomes a prison and the body merely a host for unspeakable horrors. Tell me, have you ever felt something crawling beneath your skin? What if I told you it's already begun? This is grounds for madness. But before we descend into darkness together, join the pack, subscribe, because once you hear what spreads unseen, you'll never see the world the same way again. Grounds for Madness. Chapter 1. The morning commute was interrupted by the sounds of crumpling metal and shattered glass as a sedan veered across lanes and slammed into a concrete highway divider. Police squad cars and an ambulance arrived within minutes, ready to assist the car's driver. Daniel stepped out of the ambulance, his gaze fixed on the smoking wreckage. As an EMT, he was no stranger to chaotic accident scenes, but his instincts told him this one was different. Moving cautiously toward the vehicle, he could see the driver still inside, seemingly oblivious to the fractured glass surrounding him. The man clutched and scratched at his arms frantically, and blood streaked down from ragged wounds. Daniel called out, hoping to catch the man's attention. "Sir, you're hurt. Just stay still and we'll get you help." But the driver only screamed incoherently about insects crawling under his flesh, his eyes holding a crazed, unsettled look. Daniel had seen drug-induced psychosis before, but this seemed even more deranged. He waved over the rescue crew to help extricate the man from the vehicle. Whatever substance had caused this, they needed to get him secured and to a hospital immediately. After a few tense minutes, they were able to slowly pull the bloodied, raving driver from the wreckage and restrain him. The man thrashed violently, screaming about tunnels and shadows only he could see. Once secured on a stretcher, Daniel could clearly see the deeply gouged wounds that covered the driver's arms were self-inflicted, and the man continued to scratch compulsively. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, the driver drifted in and out of coherence, muttering about insects burrowing under his skin. Daniel tried speaking calmly to him, but couldn't break through the delirious ranting. In emergency, doctors sedated the man while working to treat his physical injuries from the crash, but his psychological state remained perplexing. Daniel overheard a detective remark the driver must have been on some new exotic street drug, but his own gut told him otherwise. The bizarre skin lesions, hallucinations of insects and shadows, and uncontrollable psychosis pointed to something more mysterious than just a routine drug overdose. Daniel had originally aspired to be a doctor ever since he was young, fascinated by the complexities of biology and the human body. Sailing through his pre-medical program in university, acing exams that stumped even the most studious classmates, medical school was within reach, until fate intervened. A serious car accident left him hospitalized for months and unable to keep up with the rigorous demands of further education. Once recovered, Daniel felt lost, his career dreams shattered. But then he remembered the EMTs who had saved his life after his accident. He realized he could still help save lives by providing that same care to others, to offer comfort and support when people needed it most. Now, after years on the job, Daniel had a sixth sense for when medical cases were more complicated than they appeared. And this driver's seemingly substance-induced psychosis just didn't sit right with him. A few days later, Daniel attended another call, this time to a local high school. Teachers informed him that a 16-year-old girl began scratching madly at her neck, then disrupted the class, screaming about insects. She thrashed violently when they tried to restrain her and then escaped to a nearby empty classroom where she had barricaded herself in. Daniel headed to the room, asking the teachers to stay back. He knew confrontation could provoke her psychosis further. Speaking in a calm, empathetic voice through the door, Daniel sat with her, listening attentively while she described the hallucinations in vivid detail. She spoke of insects crawling under her skin, shadows creeping at the edge of her vision, phantom noises that no one else could hear. After many tense minutes, the young teen opened the door. Daniel immediately noticed bloody scissors lying on the classroom floor, realizing in horror that the girl had been cutting at her own skin in a desperate, vain attempt to dig the imagined bugs out. Deep lacerations covered her arms and legs. Moving swiftly, he wrapped the girl's wounds with gauze to control the bleeding before leading her onto a stretcher. After briefing the ER doctors on the girl's condition and self-inflicted wounds, Daniel asked for updates on the driver from days earlier. He was informed that the victim's tox screen had come back negative for known substances, and psychotic symptoms had only worsened since being admitted despite medications. The patient was now completely detached from reality and raving about insects constantly. In fact, there had been a disturbing rise in similar cases in recent days. Sufferers of all ages and backgrounds reporting tactile hallucinations and exhibiting paranoid, delusional behavior. As the doctor described the rise in disturbing new psychosis cases, his attention was drawn to a woman who had just entered the ER, and he waved her over. Daniel turned to see the newcomer striding purposefully towards them. Dressed in a crisply pressed lab coat, she carried herself with an air of serious professionalism. The doctor greeted her as Dr. Samira Patel from the CDC. She must be the specialist called in to investigate this unusual outbreak, Daniel realized. He introduced himself. However, Samira merely nodded in acknowledgement before turning her focus solely to the doctor. She began rapid-fire questioning about test results and case patterns. This was clearly a woman on a mission, seemingly oblivious to anything beyond the task at hand. Recognizing the gravity of this urgent situation, Daniel excused himself. "I'll leave you to it then," he said, as the two doctors barely even noticed, engrossed in questioning and theorizing. As he left the ER, Daniel's mind raced over the unfolding situation. Whatever was causing people's violent hallucinations and detachment from reality was likely spreading fast, even if the esteemed CDC doctor was too focused on lab tests and patterns to see that yet. Chapter 2. 2 days later, Daniel sat down with toast and coffee on his first day off in weeks. He flicked on the TV, planning to catch the morning news before going on a run. Just as he raised his coffee cup, an urgent report broke in. The reporter described a disturbing outbreak. Victims were developing flu-like symptoms and seizures, followed by tactile hallucinations, paranoia, and violent psychosis. Watching in dismay at footage of doctors trying to restrain a convulsing patient, he wondered how this illness was progressing so rapidly. His shocked reflections were interrupted by the blaring pager. The hospital needed all EMTs immediately for an evolving crisis. Multiple new psychiatric cases were emerging by the hour, including some medical staff succumbing. Grabbing his uniform, Daniel's mind swirled with questions. This was no longer just a few isolated incidents, but a swift epidemic of unknown origins gripping the city. No time for coffee now, he thought as he locked his apartment door and headed to his car. Samira strode through the hospital corridors, her brow furrowed in concentration. As a CDC epidemiologist, strange outbreaks were her specialty, but nothing had prepared her for this. Patients of all ages were deteriorating into violent psychosis, gripped by vivid hallucinations and paranoia. No known toxins had been detected, no environmental factors found. The data just didn't add up. Reaching the ICU ward, Samira steeled herself against the sounds of screams and moans. She focused solely on interviewing victims to identify every symptom and abnormality. Sentiment could come later. Saving lives was the priority now. After speaking with a trembling woman, trying in vain to comfort her delusional husband, Samira felt the first cracks appear in her analytical armor. These were not merely data points, but suffering people who needed her help. Early on in her investigation, a pattern of commonality did emerge, and Samira felt a flicker of hope that she had found a clue, until other cases broke the pattern. Victims were now coming in from all over the city. Some worked in offices across town, yet others had become sick after dining at restaurants. The geographic spread quickly shattered the theory, and she was left with an ever-growing number of cases and no epicenter of origin. Frustrated but determined, Samira moved on to the next analysis. The answer was here somewhere if she could just detect the right connections. Her mind churned through hypotheses, reviewing every detail as yet another hectic day without answers neared its close. Meanwhile, Daniel raced another raving psychosis patient through the hospital corridors on a gurney. The man thrashed against his restraints, crying out about insects under his skin. Rounding a corner, Daniel nearly collided with a preoccupied Samira still engrossed in her notes. Their eyes met briefly before she glanced at Daniel's distressed patient. "Sorry, didn't mean to disrupt your work," Daniel said as he moved to rush past her. "Wait," Samira replied. "These symptoms match the other cases?" Daniel nodded gravely. "Exactly the same so far, but surely the CDC has traced a pattern to the source by now," he said curtly, as he bustled past her with his patient, leaving her standing alone in the corridor. Samira paused there as she watched him disappear in the busy hospital, reconsidering how Daniel's hands-on experience with this outbreak may help her investigation. After a marathon shift responding to outbreak calls, Daniel finally clocked out, exhausted. As he turned to leave, Dr. Patel approached him briskly. "Daniel, isn't it? My apologies, but I think we might have gotten off on the wrong foot," she said. "I know it's after hours, but could we compare notes in depth on what you've been seeing on the front lines?" Daniel nodded wearily. Of course. It couldn't hurt at this point. They found a quiet cafeteria corner and got straight to analyzing the mystifying progression of symptoms and locations. Samira shuffled through her papers. A handful of early patients did visit the same downtown coffee shop, but then the geographic spread became so random and widespread. "A coffee shop," Daniel said with surprise. "Wow, wouldn't that be a major problem if we millions of caffeine-addicted humans couldn't get our daily doses?" His voice trailed off as he suddenly snapped his fingers. "The coffee cups." Samira looked at him quizzically. Sitting up from his relaxing recline, he ran his hand over the top of his spiky hair, disbelief on his face that he didn't realize this connection before. You see, I've been getting calls all over the city due to short staffing and huge case numbers, and one thing has stuck out to me. Many patients had Bruise Beans reusable cups, the green branded ones. Different suburbs and retailers, but the same cups. That can't be a coincidence, Samira murmured, wheels turning. She began feverishly searching through her data for details on the coffee brewer. That has to be the connection. Now we just have to look further into the brand while cross-referencing the supplier locations with cases. As she shuffled through her papers and folders, Daniel couldn't help but stare at her while she muttered to herself, energized by this new revelation. As she dropped a folder, she glanced up. Having been so engrossed, she had forgotten about Daniel momentarily. She noticed him watching her intently. Relaxing a little, she asked as she retrieved her file. So tell me, what made you become an EMT? Daniel explained about his accident derailing his original plans and how a caring emergency staff inspired his new career path. Well, thank goodness for your accident, Samira said, quickly recognizing her mistake. Oh, I didn't mean that the way it sounded. I meant, otherwise we would never have met. And I feel you connected dots I totally missed. She frantically corrected. For a moment, Daniel pretended to be hurt by her comment, but in the end, he couldn't keep up the facade, and the two ended up laughing together. Samira urgently had samples from numerous stockists of the Brubeans coffee brand brought back to the CDC labs for analysis. After many exhaustive tests, minute traces of a psychoactive drug were discovered in the infected coffee samples. The drug molecules seemed to interact badly with the caffeine, creating a brand new compound. Realizing this was the culprit, she cultured samples and exposed mice by having them ingest it. Within hours, the mice displayed strange and aggressive behaviors. The drug was crossing the blood-brain barrier. Samira had uncovered a new psychosis-inducing drug compound that had evaded detection until now. She analyzed its molecular structure, gaining insights into its psychotic effects. The drug had a weakness, though. It broke down rapidly without caffeine to stabilize it. Cutting off caffeine sources would essentially neutralize it. Samira contacted the FDA immediately to identify the contamination source. Further testing revealed the drug originated from a small farm's water supply, contaminated by nearby PsychMed factory waste. Authorities were able to halt distribution and destroy all tainted products. One unexpected development in the thousands of affected sufferers. As the caffeine was slowly excreted from patients' bodies, the compound became unstable and began to break down, and case numbers soon dwindled. After an exhausting week tracking down the psychosis outbreak's cause, Daniel and Samira decided to unwind with drinks at a local bar. The atmosphere was lighthearted as they bantered playfully. Turns out you're not just a lab nerd after all, Daniel teased. And you've got more than an EMT's instincts, Samira fired back with a wink. Daniel found himself captivated by her smile. He had come to admire this brilliant epidemiologist both professionally and personally. Their laughter was interrupted by Daniel's beeper sounding. I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. Daniel excused himself to call the pager number. As Samira sat alone, a breaking news alert on the television caught her attention. The reporter announced new psychosis cases emerging. No, This can't be. The contaminated coffee was all traced and destroyed, Samira pondered aloud. As Daniel returned to the table with a worried expression, their eyes met. "I've just been called urgently into work," he said. Samira gestured towards the news report, and they watched with dismay as the symptoms were listed. The same as the previous outbreak, but with one disturbing alteration. The last symptom before succumbing to full psychosis. Now crawling under patients' skin were spiders.